Magic, White and Black, the science on finite and infinite life. Consciousness is a relative term. It is not scientific to say we are asleep, as long as we do not know who we are. We can only truly say that such and such functions of a physical or psychical organism, which are called our own, are asleep or inactive, while others are active and awake. We may be fully awake relatively to one thing and asleep relatively to another. A somnambule's body is in a state resembling death, while his higher consciousness is fully alive and employs even far superior powers of perception than if all the activity of his life principle were engaged in performing the functions of his lower organism. Matter and motion are relative terms, both referring to manifestations of something we do not know and which we may call spirit. There is no motion without matter, no matter without some motion, and every power is therefore substantial. A solid mass of matter is condensed energy, representing a certain amount of latent power. Every force is invisible substance in motion. Space, extension, duration are relative. Their qualities change according to our standard of measurement and according to our mode of perception. To an animalcule in a drop of water, that drop may appear as an ocean, and to an insect living on a leaf, that leaf may constitute a world. If during our sleep the whole of the visible world were to shrink to the size of a walnut, or expand to 1,000-fold its present dimensions, on awakening we should perceive no change, provided that change had equally affected everything, including ourselves. A child has no conception of its relation to space and tries to grasp the moon with its hands. And a person who has been born blind and is afterwards made to see cannot judge of distances correctly. Our thoughts know of no intervening space when they travel from one part of the globe to another. Our conceptions of our relation to space are based upon experience and memory acquired in our present condition. If we were moving among entirely different conditions, our experiences and consequently our conceptions would be entirely different. Space, relatively to form, can only have 3 dimensions because all forms are composed of 3 dimensions: length, thickness, and height. Consciousness in the absolute is unconsciousness relatively to everything. A consciousness being in relation with nothing is inconceivable. A consciousness existing in relation to its own self is self-consciousness. The absolute is independent of its manifestations, but all manifestations depend on the presence of that which becomes manifest. God can exist in his own divine nature without revealing his presence to his creatures, but his creatures cannot exist without God. We know that space exists, but it is inconceivable to us as long as it does not become revealed to us in a form. Forms are objectified space. Without such a manifestation of 3-dimensional bodies, we can form no conception of space. We know that God exists, but we cannot conceive of his existence unless his nature becomes revealed to us in its trinity within ourselves. The dimensions of space exist in our own mind. We conceive of no dimensions of space in a mathematical point, and self-consciousness exists in itself without any relation to anything except its own self. This might therefore be called a one-dimensional space. As to two-dimensional space, everyone knows that there is a difference between good and evil, between love and hate, etc. And the realization of such a difference furnishes us with a conception of space in which we perceive only two dimensions. Three-dimensional space is the world of corporeal bodies. But there is also a fourth dimension of space, known only to the enlightened, who have learned how to square the circle, because 4 is the number of truth and 3 the number of form. As our conception of space is only relative, so is our conception of time. It is not time itself, but its measurement of which we are conscious, and time is nothing to us unless in connection with our association of ideas. The human mind can only receive a small number of impressions per second. If we were to receive only one impression per hour, our life would seem exceedingly short. And if we were able to receive, for instance, the impression of each single undulation of a yellow ray of light whose vibrations number 509 billion per second, a single day in our life would appear to be an eternity without end. To a prisoner in a dungeon who has no occupation, time may seem extremely long, while for him who is actively engaged it passes quickly. During sleep we have no conception of time, but a sleepless night passed in suffering seems very long. During a few seconds of time we may, in a dream, pass through experiences which would require a number of years in the regular course of events, while in the unconscious state, time has no existence for us. But what is the difference between objective and subjective states of existence? We do not cease to live while we are asleep, but we have a different kind of perceptions in either state. The popular idea is that sensual objective perceptions are real and subjective ones only the products of our imagination. But a little reflection will show that all perceptions, the objective as well as the subjective ones, are results of our imagination. If we look at a tree, the tree does not come into our eye, but its picture appears in our mind. If we look at a form, we perceive an impression made in our mind by the image of an object existing beyond the limits of our body. If we look at a subjective image of our own creation, we perceive the impression which it produces on our mind. In either case, the pictures exist objectively in our mind and we perceive the impressions. But here, the great question arises: who or what is this unknown one that perceives the images existing in its own mind and the sensations that come to his consciousness? What is that which you call your L, which knows that you know, and which also recognizes your ignorance? What is that self, which is neither the body nor the mind, but which uses these things as its instruments? If you know that invisible being, you may throw away this book. It can teach you nothing new, because you know God and are the wisest of men. The basis upon which all exhibition of magical power rests is a knowledge of the relations that exist between objective and subjective states of existence and the source from which they originate. If we conceive in our mind of the picture of a thing we have seen before, an objective form of that thing comes into existence within our own mind, and is composed of the substance of our own mind. If by continual practice we gain sufficient power to hold on to that image and to prevent it from being driven away and dispersed by other thoughts, it will become comparatively dense and can be projected upon the mental sphere of others so that they may actually see objectively that which exists subjectively as an image within our own mind. But he who cannot hold on to a thought and control it at will cannot impress it upon the minds of others, and therefore such experiments fail, not on account of any absolute impossibility to perform them, but on account of the weakness of those who experiment, but have not the power to control their own thoughts, and to render them corporeal enough for transmission. Everything is either a reality or a delusion according to the standpoint from which we view it. The words real and unreal are only relative terms, and what may seem real in one state of existence appears unreal in another. Money, love, power, etc. appear very real to those who need them. To those who have outgrown the necessity for their possession, they are only illusions. That which we realize is real to us, however unreal it may be to another. If my imagination is powerful enough to represent to me the presence of an angel, that angel will be there, alive and real, my own creation, no matter how invisible and unreal he may be to another. If your mind can create for you a paradise in a wilderness, that paradise will have for you an objective existence. Everything that exists in the universal mind, and if the individual mind becomes conscious of his relation to a thing therein, it begins to perceive it. No man can realize a thing beyond his experience. He cannot know anything to which he stands in no relation. For the purpose of perceiving, three facts are necessary: the perception, the perceiver, and the thing that is the object of perception. If they exist on entirely different planes and cannot enter into relationship, no perception will be possible. If I wish to look at my face and am not able to step out of myself, I must use a mirror to establish a relation between myself and the object of my perception. The mirror has no sensation, and I cannot see myself in the mirror. I can only see myself in my mind. The reflection of the mirror produces a reflection which is objective to my mind and which comes to my perception. The fact is that everything appears either objective or subjective according to the state of consciousness of the perceiver, and what may be to him entirely subjective in one state may appear to him objective in another. The highest ideal truths have to him who can realize them an objective existence. The grossest material forms have no existence to him who cannot perceive them.